It's April 10th, 2025, and we're only a few days away from the end of the regular season in the NBA. That means it's time for the final regular season player ratings update for NBA 2K25. As always, I'm Pete Toll, aka PT Sports 84, bringing you all the latest official NBA 2K content, as well as a lot of customized rosters for the community for NBA 2K25. So, jumping right into the ratings update, as always, we start with the Philadelphia 76ers. Their season has just been decimated by injuries to Jared McCain, Joel Embiid, of course, Paul George injured and just not panning out. A lot of other assorted injuries on the roster as well. So the positives for the team has been Justin Edwards and, of course, Quentin Grimes. In this update, Quentin Grimes goes a +1 to an 85 overall. Yerson Yabusele goes +1 to a 79. He has been a bright spot. I hope the Sixers can keep him this year or this offseason. Justin Edwards actually gets a bump +1 to a 77, but he also gets a position update to small forward. Adem Bona has been starting a lot of games. He goes +2 to a 77. Ricky Council, the fourth, actually drops -1 to a 74. And then, of course, we have at the bottom of the roster, Alex Reese goes +1 to a 70. That's the 76ers. So moving on to the Milwaukee Bucks. Man, basically the injury to Damian Lillard has forced them to shift gears with what their offensive flow looks like for Giannis. They have Gary Trent Jr. going +1 to a 79 overall. Ryan Rollins has played a lot under Doc Rivers. Good for him going from a two-way contract to a rotation piece, +2 to a 77. Pat Connaughton is back playing some minutes. He goes +1 to a 74. Going over the Chicago Bulls, I don't know what management's thinking. They had the chance to play all their guys last game. Guys wanted to play. They sat guys out. I don't know what their plan is here, but who knows at this point. But they do get two players at the top of the roster, Kobe White and Josh Giddey, both going to 85 overall, +2 for Giddey, +1 for Kobe White. Modest Bazelis, who is been a bright spot for them, +2 to a 79 overall. Kevin Huerter has turned it around since coming to Chicago, +1 for him to a 79. Position changes for Julian Phillips to small forward and Patrick Williams to power forward. No ratings change. And then Talen Horton-Tucker +1 to a 75 overall. Going over to the Cleveland Cavaliers, just really one ratings change for them. Javonte Green goes -1. Then they have a position change for Isaac Okoro back to small forward. Boston Celtics, some changes for them. Derek White goes -1 to an 87. Drew Holiday +1 to an 85. Sam Hauser and Luke Cornett, it seems they always change together in updates. Both +1 to a 78. Torrey Craig +1 to a 76. And Baylor Shireman +2 to a 71. Los Angeles Clippers, we have some changes for them. Kawhi Leonard back in the 90 overall club. He's +2 to a 91. Position update to power forward. Norman Powell, no ratings change, but a position update to small forward. Bogdan Bogdanovic has been very good off the bench, +1 to an 80 overall. That's all the changes for LA. Memphis Grizzlies, they have had turmoil since basically Taylor Jenkins was let go. Tumas Lasalo, he gets added as the interim head coach. Isalo is basically a offensive guru. He's going to shift it back to a more pick and roll based, lots of 3-point shooting from what he said. We'll see how that goes. John Morant does get a +1 bump to a 92. Jaren Jackson Jr. -1 to a 90. Desmond Bain -1 to an 86. Santi Aldama -1 to an 80. Jalen Wells does not have his injury designation. He broke his wrist on that freak fall last game. Thankfully, he's okay and he'll recover well, but he does go -2 to a 78. Luke Kennard, -2 to a 77. And then Vince Williams Jr., -1 to a 75. Going over to the Atlanta Hawks, Trae Young, +1 to a 91. Zachary Richeche, +1 to an 81. Karis LeVert, -1 to an 80. Terrence Mann, +1 to a 77. Vit Krejci has played well this season, +1 to a 76. Mo Gaye goes -1 to a 74. And Dominic Barlow goes +1 to a 73. Going over to the Miami Heat, Bam Adebayo gets bumped all the way back up, +2 to an 89. Tyler Hero gets a position change to point guard and goes +1 to an 88. Andrew Wiggins has been very good on the Miami Heat, +1 to an 81. Davion Mitchell, also very good since coming over in the trade, +1 to a 78. Duncan Robinson, -1 to a 77. Kyle Anderson, also very good since the trade, +1 to a 77. Jaime Jaquez Jr. has fallen off a cliff play-wise, -1 to a 76. Alec Burks, +1 to a 76. Haywood Highsmith, -1 to a 75. And then last but not least, Pell Larson, +2 to a 75. Charlotte Hornets, another lost season for them, unfortunately. Miles Bridges goes -1 to an 83. Nick Smith Jr. +1 to a 77. Josh Green goes -1 to a 75. Daquan Jeffries has been starting for a while now, +1 to a 74. KJ Simpson, +1 to a 74. He actually is the one that unintentionally injured Jalen Wells. They're really good friends, so if you follow KJ on social media, he was very apologetic. I took it as very sincere. It was a mistake in the moment, and it happens if you played competitive basketball. It wasn't a dirty play, in my opinion, if you played competitive basketball. But prayers up to Jalen Wells for a full recovery for next season. Tajon Ceylon, +1 to a 73. Utah Jazz, the tank continues for Cooper Flagg. -1 for Walker Kessler to an 83. +1 for Keontae George to an 81. Kyle Filipowski has been really good for them, +1 to an 80. Isaiah Collier has just been passing the ball really well, +1 to a 79. I think he's their point guard going forward. Keontae George should be considered more of a two guard. They could flip Colin Sexton, in my opinion. We'll see what happens. Bryce Sensabaugh has been playing more of a small ball 4/small forward role. He goes +1 to a 77. Johnny Jazang, +1 to a 74. Cody Williams drops back down to a 72, -1. Same for Shvi Mikhailuk, -1 to a 72. And then Oscar Tshiebwe, +2 to a 71. He can really rebound the ball. I like his play. He will probably stick in the NBA next year, hopefully on a standard contract. Sacramento Kings has their own set of turmoil as well, but they do have some changes in this one. Malik Monk shifted back to shooting guard, no ratings change. Keegan Murray, +1 to an 81. Keon Ellis, position change to point guard, -1 to a 78. Trey Lyles, +1 to a 76. Markelle Fultz has been okay, up and down play, -1 to a 74. I think he's still getting his legs back and all of that, so we'll see what happens for next season. And then they added Terrence Davis this morning in the roster update. He's back after that Achilles injury last year with the Rip City Remix. Glad to see him back in the NBA and healthy. New York Knicks. OG Anunoby goes +1 to an 87. Josh Hart, -1 to a 84. Miles McBride, -1 to a 78. And then +1 for DeLon Wright, who had been starting a couple of games with Jalen Brunson out. LA Lakers. What a performance by Luka Doncic last night. Great to see that for him. I am critical of Doncic's personality as far as barking at the refs and all that stuff. It's got to be consistent for him on the defensive end as well. I think if Doncic is locked in and you get LeBron locked in as kind of the second guy being able to feed off of Doncic, and then you've got Reeves as another secondary ball handler and scorer, they could make some noise in the playoffs, but it's all got to come together for them. Everybody's got to kind of buy in to that plan, I think, but we'll see what happens. Dalton Connect, -1 to a 77. Jared Vanderbilt, -1 to a 77. And then Gabe Vincent, +1 to a 77. Orlando Magic, Anthony Black has been playing really well for them, +1 to an 80 overall. Then we get a couple of changes at the bottom of the roster. Caleb Houston and Corey Joseph both go +1 to a 74 overall. Dallas Mavericks, PJ Washington goes +1 to an 81 while getting position changed to small forward. Spencer Dinwiddie goes +1 to a 79. Brandon Williams just had his two-way contract converted to a standard contract. He goes +1 to a 77. Max Christie goes -1 to a 77. Caleb Barton has had a rough go in Dallas, -1 to a 75. And then Jaden Hardy goes +1 to a 75. Oddly enough, no change for Kai Jones, who had played really well. Maybe 2K didn't see that, not sure. Brooklyn Nets, got some changes for them. D'Angelo Russell, -1 to a 79. Zaire Williams goes -2 to a 77. Day'Ron Sharpe, -1 to a 77. Jalen Wilson, +1 to a 76. Tyrese Martin, +1 to a 76. And then Dariq Whitehead gets a position change to shooting guard. Denver Nuggets have their own turmoil. David Adelman is now promoted to interim head coach. That has been changed in this update. And the only two ratings updates for them, Russell Westbrook goes -1 to an 82, while DeAndre Jordan goes a +1 to a 76. Moving on to the Indiana Pacers. Some changes for them. Tyrese Halliburton back in the 90 overall club, +1 for him. Miles Turner, +1 to an 84. Andrew Nembhard, +1 to an 83. +1 for Aaron Nesmith to an 81. And then TJ McConnell's back in the 80 overall club, +1 for him to an 80. Two position changes for them. Jarris Walker to power forward / center. He's been playing the small ball center role a little bit, so they made that change. And then Johnny Furphy, limited minutes at small forward and shooting guard. So that he was changed to small forward. New Orleans Pelicans, Jose Alvarado goes -1 to a 78, +1 for Bruce Brown Jr. to a 76, position update to shooting guard. Jordan Hawkins, -1 to a 75. Antonio Reeves, +1 to a 73. He's been balling out. Same for Keon Brooks Jr., +5 for him to a 72. And then we've got a slew of position updates for them. Zion moves to power forward. CJ McCollum to shooting guard. We've got Herb Jones to small forward. We've got Jamal Cain to small forward. And then Trey Murphy III to small forward. This is in anticipation of next season, I believe. That way they can get everything lined up for the offseason. That would be my guess. Going over to the Detroit Pistons, some changes for them. Asar Thompson, +1 to an 83. He's been doing really well, except the three-point shooting's not there, but maybe it'll get there by next season. Fred Vincent is on the team as the shooting coach, so I think that'll help them. Tim Hardaway Jr. goes +1 to an 80, while Malik Beasley goes -1 to an 80. Marcus Sasser has been hooping, +1 to a 76 overall. Same for Ron Holland. And then Simone Fontecchio goes -1 to a 74. Same with Paul Reed, -1 to a 74. And that is it for the Detroit Pistons. way to go for them for turning the season around. Shout out to JB Bickerstaff for just really igniting this team throughout. Toronto Raptors, some changes for them. -1 to an 85 for Scotty Barnes. +1 to a 76 for Jonathan Mogbo. Same for Jamal Sheed. +1 to a 76. AJ Lawson gets a bump -1 to a 75. And then Cole Swider added for the rest of the season, +3 for him to a 70 overall. Houston Rockets, we have a new, a tie, I guess you should say, for top rating for them. Amin Thompson goes +1 to an 87. We've got Dylan Brooks going +1 to an 83. And then Tari Eason getting a bump -1 to an 83. They actually locked in the second seed as well, for anybody that's curious to know the playoff seeding. So San Antonio Spurs, just some small changes for them. Sandro Mamukelashvili goes -1 to a 78. -1 for Charles Bassey to a 77. And then Malachi Branham, -1 to a 74. If they're going to make changes in anticipation for next season, I would have liked to have seen De'Aaron Fox move to point guard. But we can obviously manually change that ourselves. Next is the Phoenix Suns. What an awful season for them. Highly disappointing. I actually had them as the 5th seed in the West as my season predictions, and man, I was wrong. Kevin Durant's going to officially not be eligible for All-NBA now. Devin Booker, he's kind of lost right now, and just the way the roster is constructed. They will not bring back Bradley Beal per reports. They'll buy him out essentially or try to trade him. -1 for Devin Booker to a 90. Nick Richards -1 to a 78. -1 for Tyus Jones to a 77. He'll probably move on as well. Grayson Allen -1 to a 77. Cody Martin -1 to a 75. And then the plus side for them, Colin Gillespie played really well as a fill-in starting point guard while Beal was out. +5 for him to a 74. Oklahoma City Thunder. Chet Holmgren has been struggling lately, -1 to an 87. Lou Dort gets a bump, +1 to an 82. And then Brandon Carlson down at the bottom gets a bump, +1 to a 71. Minnesota Timberwolves, some changes for them. Rudy Gobert gets a bump, +1 to an 86. Jaden McDaniels goes -1 to an 83. Same for Naz Reid, -1 to an 82. And then Nickeil Alexander-Walker continues to play well, +1 to a 79 overall. Here's where it gets interesting. Portland Trail Blazers. Some updates for them. Denny Avdia has been on fire over the past month and a half. +2 for him to an 86 overall. Also, his position's updated to power forward. We get Anthony Simons, -2 to an 82. +1 to an 82 for Tamani Kamara, whose position's changed to small forward. Same for Shaden Sharp, +1 to an 82. Then we go down and we get Delano Banton shifted to point guard, +2 for him to a 76. Matisse Thybulle, +1 to a 75. And Ja Parith, +1 to a 74. Golden State Warriors. Brandon Podziemski has been on fire, +2 for him to an 81 overall. That's the only ratings change here, but we do get a position update for Guy Santos to small forward. Last but not least, rounding out the update is the Washington Wizards. Chris Middleton, -1 to an 81. Not sure. I guess that's based on previous play because he hadn't really played a ton in this cycle. Bub Carrington goes +1 to a 79. Okay. -1 to Marcus Smart to a 79. Then we get a handful of guys that have played a lot because of injury. AJ Johnson gets a big bump along with the position change to shooting guard. He goes +5 to a 75 overall. He's kind of been the small forward, but his position's more of a shooting guard. Tristan Vucevic goes +1 to a 75. And then Colby Jones goes +3 to a 74 and gets a position update to small forward. I would have liked to have seen, if we're going to do position updates, swap Koulibaly to small forward. I think that's ultimately where he ends up on the roster. Maybe not, though. Maybe they move Kaishan George back down to small forward next season and go a little bit different. It's all going to depend on where Cooper Flagg lands, essentially, because that kind of sets up other teams for what they're looking for if they don't get Cooper Flagg. So let me know down in the comments who you think should have went up, down, any other changes. This has been a solid year for 2K, especially with the badge updates, more than they have ever done in the past. Speaking of badge updates, make sure you're going to Operation Sports. Look in the forums. I always put the latest update thread there. Underneath my original post is always the Real 2K Insider. John Markish, he always posts all of the badge changes in detail. Also, if you're looking for a different set of ratings that's more tailored to the scaling that 2K uses for the most part, along with accuracy. Make sure you're checking out John's roster, the Real 2K rosters. He has a thread in the roster thread of Operation Sports. You could check that out and see all of his changes there. So just something different for anybody that's looking for a little bit more accuracy, things like that. Make sure you hit the thumbs up button on this video if you liked it. Also, share the video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We're on our way to 5K subscribers. Also, I'll have donation links down on the bottom. If you've liked all of the custom and official 2K content that I review, as well as create with the custom content, please consider a donation. That really helps bring more custom content throughout the year. I'm going to have a summer off-season roster as well as a bunch more retro updates. Trying to work on my own EuroLeague/EuroCup update. I'm not as familiar with those teams, so doing some research, things like that, and just trying to get those updated. That'll probably take me a little while, but hope to have that updated. But thanks, everybody, for the great year of 2K official content. We'll probably get one more or two ratings updates throughout the playoffs, so I'll be back with the official content. But likely from here, unless we get a player likeness update that has some new players in it, that's probably it for the official content this year from 2K as far as what goes on my channel. So it'll be custom content from here. But thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Hope everybody has a great rest of your week into the weekend. Stay safe and take care.